So please welcome Tom Binnings.
I gave a talk here a few years ago when there was absolutely nothing positive to say about the economy, and I just invited everybody to turn around, enjoy what really has to be one of the most incredible views in the entire world, and order a Bloody Mary. So I thought we ought to maybe focus and take a very high-level perspective and a very long-term view of the economy, and so I've titled this The Great Transition of the Early 21st Century. Where we are today, this is, we've had, locally for instance, all the indicators are positive for the first time in years, and nationally all the states are growing except Wisconsin and Alaska. So we're doing, there really has been some great traction gained in the economy in the last 4 months. And this is very positive given that, back in September and August we were talking about the prospects for a double dip. Just given the legislation that was passed last year and that will go into effect as a result of, I call it the not-so-super committee failing to act. So we're going to move on with this long-term perspective, and this slide, my spaghetti bowl, is where I began to ask the question. The Great Recession, again, is this bottom red line, and you can see how deep the drop was, 6% job loss. All of those other lines are previous recessions since World War II. So this was by far the worst drop in terms of employment loss since World War II. You can also see that it will be the longest recovery period, very slow recovery. But what's most disturbing to me, and what really got my attention, was this will be the longest recovery period. The second longest recovery period was the 2001 recession. The third longest was the 1990 recession, and the fourth longest was the 1981 recession. So the thesis is clearly that something is lengthening the recovery cycle in the business cycle. And so the question today is what are those factors? What is it that's changing and lengthening that recovery cycle? I get annoyed when I increasingly hear that the majority of Americans think that China is the dominant economy now in the world. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. And China is getting ready to face many problems of their own in the next 10 to 15 years. So, what's really occurring, this point of history that we're in right now, is the end of 500 years of European economic dominance. And that has been replaced, or is being replaced, by the United States ever since World War II. And whether we'll survive 500 years as a dominant economic player or what, I think that 50 is pretty short. And we have too many things going for us in our economy and our culture. And if we can overcome some of the challenges, I think we will continue to be the dominant economic world power. We consume 25% of everything produced in the world. We produce just about that same amount. When we talk about, well, the economy will get better as soon as we deleverage, as soon as consumers deleverage and pay off some of their debt and they can consume again, well, I'm not so sure that that's going to happen because the boomers are not going to be in the consumptive mode. Even had the Great Recession not occurred, they're moving into that age group to become less of a consumer. And secondly, over half of all the deleveraging that has occurred is through bankruptcy. And so the millennials will not be able to do that, at least with their student loan debt. And now turning our attention to federalism. And there are lots of things that can be said about federalism, and I'll just, rather than say, it's all about the politicians who won't act or act one way or whatever, I prefer to think of it in terms of, we're the ones who elect them, number one. But secondly, the Wall Street Journal reported last year, I think the number was 44%, it was definitely over 40%, of all American households get some form of direct payment from the U.S. government. And then when you add the rest of us, if you don't get a direct payment, who are trying to minimize taxes and avoid taxes, I conclude that we're all gaming the system, okay? And it's normal. I mean, the federal system represents 25% of the economy. when you add the state and local governments, you're over 40% of the economy. You know, I think, really, to me, the greatest thing that we have going for us as an economy, and this goes back many years, and I see it continuing for many years, is we have the private sector, which is the most productive and innovative private sector in the world, deals with very effectively with new technology and capital investment in the short term, 10 years or less, when they can see a real payoff. And then we have the government sector funding our national defense. And in national defense, you always want to be on the cutting edge with technology, because that's how you ultimately win major wars, is to outsmart the other guy or have the latest and greatest technology. And those technologies ultimately migrate, some form of that technology that the private sector would never invest in because of the long-term horizon with basic R&D. By the time it's gone through sort of the societal needs test and goes through the military situation, eventually it makes it into the private sector, like we see all the space products. And that's very positive.
So the question is, do I agree with the notion that the building industry will never recover to the level it was in the glory years of the mid-2000s? And I would agree with that. It will be a long time before that occurs. On the other hand, looking at the census data and looking at vacancy rates, the surprise is how low the vacancy rate is in Colorado. So even with all the foreclosures we've had, the vacancy rate in the 2000 census and the American Community Survey is actually pretty low in single-family homes. So again, we're fortunate in Colorado. I think Denver only realized a 9% devaluation of how the housing inventory compared to 35% nationwide and 45% on the West Coast. So we're in a better position to see a recovery in the home building industry, but I don't see it returning, in my lifetime. I don't see it returning to the real boom days where we were building 5,000 units, for instance, in Colorado Springs. I don't see that happening at all.